The only thing I found stability in is my mental health. Everything else is still very much up in the air. Let's talk about money. How to deal with Asian parents disapproving of your life decisions. My greatest fear was, so my video on quitting did a bit better than expected. What the fuck? It has been exactly 1 year since I posted that video, and to celebrate my 1 year anniversary of quitting my stable 9-to-5 job, I wanted to make a 1 year update video, and I wanted to make it as helpful as it could be for you watching. So what better way to do that than throw out a Q&A. You guys submitted some really great questions on my Instagram and my YouTube community post, and I'm really excited to get into them today. And this is also a really great opportunity for me to be transparent about realistically, what is life really like after quitting your job? Quitting your job is extremely romanticized, and I am certainly not one of those success stories where I quit my job and then 1 year later I've built a multi-million-dollar business or anything like that. This is very much still a work in progress for me. I anticipate this is gonna be a long video and I'm gonna be here for a while, so I got my tea here just in case, and I would love for you to join me. If you have other better things to do, then please go do them. I am not offended. But if you are interested or curious about what life looks like 1 year after quitting your job, then this is gonna be a really valuable video for you. So let's get into it. As I'm editing this video, I'm realizing that this entire video would make a lot more sense if I provided a bit of backstory first. So let's do that quickly now. In July of 2021, I started working full-time as a hospital social worker. It was a very exciting job. It was a very fast-paced environment, and no 2 days looked the same. But at the same time, that is what made the job very mentally and emotionally draining. And while I was working full-time, I always had this desire and interest to give this YouTube thing a try and also work for myself, but I was not able to act on that desire because this job took up most of my mental energy. And then in June of 2022, I decided to drop down to part-time at the hospital so that I could have some more space in my life to recover from burnout. And this setup was a lot better for me, but after a few months, I realized that it wasn't really working very well for me either, because even though it was only part-time, I was still spending half of my days feeling completely drained and exhausted. And so in November of 2022, I decided to leave the hospital entirely and instead pursue a different social work career path of practicing as a therapist. This is something that has always interested me, and it's also something that I genuinely, truly enjoy, and that energizes me as opposed to just drains me. It also allows for the opportunity to work for yourself if you want to, have the autonomy to set your own hours and work from home, but with that also comes the unpredictable income because clients are never guaranteed. But it also freed up the time and space in my life to make more videos and take this YouTube thing more seriously. So yeah, I guess that's been my resume for the last 2 and a bit years. The first question, what was your greatest fear? My greatest fear was running out of money and having to go back to working at a hospital. I think this is a very common fear for people who are thinking about quitting their jobs, that their savings are gonna run out and then they're gonna have to go back. This is still very much a fear that I'm still dealing with, but on a much lower level now. And I'm gonna share with you how I dealt with that fear. And actually, somebody else submitted a question that allows me to perfectly share that with you. So let me answer that question now. What would you tell someone who can't leave their job because of certain responsibilities, despite how unhappy they are? By responsibilities, I'm assuming this is referring to financial responsibilities, because typically that is the reason why people stay in jobs even though they're making them deeply unhappy, including myself. I've given this answer quite a bit of thought, and money has also been one of the main things on my mind since I quit my job, so let's talk about money. But first, with all the necessary disclaimers of I am not a financial advisor. I am a therapist, but I'm not your personal therapist. So please seek support from a licensed therapist or a licensed financial advisor, whatever you're looking for actual professional advice for your individual situation. I'm just a normal person who has an interest in personal finance, and I'm just on here sharing a summary of my learnings. Unless you are a trust fund kid, we all have an obligation to make money. We all got bills to pay. That's just life. That's just capitalism. Obviously, we can't all just quit our jobs to follow our dreams without looking at the money side of things first. When I first started making real money from my first big girl job as a hospital social worker is when I also realized that I don't know how to manage my money. And so that's when I started doing my own research and consuming content from people like Ramit Sethi and creators on YouTube like Nisha, Brandon Beavis, Vincent Chan. These creators are all killing the game. And the more I learned about personal finance, I guess on my own, the more I just thought like, what the heck? Like, as a society, we have been let down massively by the education system for not teaching us anything about money. Growing up, all I knew about money is that you have to make it to survive, and the only way to make enough of it to survive is through a 9-to-5 job. And if you want to have more money, the only ways to do that are to get a higher paying job, be frugal, and basically spend the least amount of money possible. And as I learned more about personal finances on my own, it made me realize that I had this idea about money because this is the idea that my parents had about money, and they passed it down to me. They thought that everyone has to go to work. That's just the way it is, even if they don't like it, because this is what we have to do in order to buy a house, buy a car, pay for our groceries, and send our kids off to college. It worked for them, and they were okay with this way of life. And because it worked for them and they were okay with it, they think that it'll work for us and we'll be okay with it too. They don't realize that what worked 40 years ago isn't necessarily going to work today. We're in very different economic circumstances now. Housing prices are rising while incomes are not, and jobs are becoming increasingly more stressful, and rates of burnout are at all-time highs. And then in 2020, we saw all these people being let go from their jobs just by a drop of a hat. And so us millennial and Gen Z are left here being like, okay, so I have to put myself through more stress to get less bang for my buck. And then on top of that, live with the anxiety that I could lose my job at any second. So with all this being considered, I don't think it's unreasonable for the younger generation to want more from their jobs, because even if their parents were unhappy in their jobs, at least they could still afford a nice house. And this is no longer the case. The younger generation doesn't want to be unhappy in their jobs and still living paycheck to paycheck. They want work that they actually enjoy and they get a sense of meaning and fulfillment and all those things out of, and also allows them to keep up with the cost of living. This sounds very negative, I realize, but I'm gonna share with you my main takeaway from all this, I guess, self-learning I've done on personal finances, because it gave me a lot of hope in realizing that I don't have to stay in a job that's making me miserable just to barely keep up with my basic financial obligations. So my main takeaway was that we should not be relying on only one source of income, aka our full-time 9-to-5 job. Because number one, by doing that, we are putting all of our financial power and livelihood in the hands of our employer, who, as we saw in 2020, could really let go of us in a split second for reasons that are completely out of our control. And number two, relying on our job as our only source of income also limits our ability to make more money so that we can buy a house and all those things, because it's dependent on us trading our time for money, which we only have so much time that we can give. So to take our financial power back into our own hands and escape this time for money trap, we should be diversifying our income streams in ways that are not directly tied to our time. And people are finding so many ways to do this on the internet these days through different online side hustle businesses and stuff, such as starting a YouTube channel, creating a digital product like a course or a software or something. doing some drop shipping. And these are also some of the ways that people are finding that enjoyment and fulfillment out of work, while also be able to make some money to allow them to buy a house and all those things. The key is to provide as much value as you can to as many people as you can, because at the end of the day, money is just an exchange of value, and the more value you can provide, the more money you can make. And you can provide value to a lot more people on the internet than you can in your day job. Another important way we should be diversifying our income in a way that's not directly tied to us trading our time for money is through investing, either through stocks and bonds, ETFs, obviously doing our research first. So if I were to answer this question directly, I would say, don't limit yourself into thinking that the only way that you can meet your financial responsibilities is through a 9-to-5 job that makes you miserable. There are so many ways to make a living and make ends meet these days, especially now with the internet, which our parents did not have. The key is to get savvy, get resourceful, get creative, and find a way to make a living that doesn't suck the life out of you and that actually adds enjoyment to your life. And that also allows you to pursue your life goals and ambitions that you have outside of your day job, because let's be real, we've all put some of those on the back burner because of our job. Now, while we're doing our research, I'm just gonna assume that we're all using our critical thinking, okay? Because there is a lot of bullshit out there. Money is a very sensitive topic, and I wanna be very clear that I'm not presenting this as a magic bullet or anything. Starting any kind of online business or learning about investing requires a lot of upfront time commitment. And I'm still putting in that upfront time commitment. I have not cracked the code and reached financial freedom or anything. This all may or may not apply to you, so please take everything I'm saying with a huge pinch of salt. I'm just on here sharing something I learned about money that changed the trajectory of my life, and if it helps you, fantastic, but please do your own research, consult actual professionals and not just some random person on YouTube. How to start looking for other jobs when the current job takes up most of your mental energy. How to pursue a backup plan before quitting. Yeah, it is really tricky when your job alone already puts you at your limit for your time, your mental energy, your resources. So how are we supposed to create any space in our life for anything else when our job is already taking up most of it? This is a really great question. I am all for using any downtime at work to do any other life tasks, including job searching, doing some research into other career paths you might be interested in, or doing some brainstorming and planning to come up with an exit strategy that also includes how you're going to manage your finances. As long as we're still getting all the work that we need to get done and we're making ourselves available if anyone needs us, I really don't see the harm in this. Now, in terms of how to pursue a backup plan, I like to think of ideally where would you want to be and kind of reverse engineer and work backwards to figure out what are the steps that you're going to need to take to get there. So for example, let's say that you want to be a successful cooking content creator. You want to be doing this full time. You want to be working fully for yourself. You want to be making enough of a living from this cooking content creation thing to be able to sustain yourself and treat yourself every once in a while. So what would this look like? Maybe that would mean that you would drop down to part-time at your current job to free up some time to make this cooking content. But maybe first, to be able to do that, you have to save up an emergency fund of, let's say, 3 to 6 months of your basic living expenses, depending on your comfort level. So that money would come from your current job. You might also want to invest in some equipment like a camera and lighting and stuff, and maybe you want to buy some courses to learn how to be a successful content creator. So that would mean doing some calculations to figure out how much you would need for that emergency fund, how much you would need for that startup cost, how long it would take to save up that amount in your current job, and then maybe once you have that date, then that would be the date that you decide that you are going to drop down to part-time at your your current job. And then maybe from there you decide that once you are making as much from your cooking content creation as your day job, that's the day that you fully leave your job and go full time into this cooking content creation thing. This is just an example, and I'm just thinking out loud. This is gonna look very different for everyone, but I do think that it is a really useful exercise to start with the end goal in mind and then work backwards from there. What do you miss the most? The bi-weekly paycheck that came in no matter what. Honestly, it was really nice and comfy to know that a decently sized paycheck of the same amount each time was gonna come into my bank account every 2 weeks. It gave me a sense of security, and I definitely worried way less about money then than I do now. And also it just made managing my finances way easier and more straightforward because I was working with the same number each time. However, I still don't miss it enough to be jumping to go back into a full-time job. Before I entered the working world, I seriously did not know that there were other life paths that you could take other than working a 9-to-5 job that you don't really like that much to get a stable paycheck to sustain yourself and maybe go on vacation every now and then. But once I entered the working world myself and I experienced how empty and stuck I felt following that path, and how regretful I felt for neglecting things that were way more important to me than this job, and just how I felt like I wasn't really using my time well, I couldn't help but wonder, like, there must be more to life than this. There must be another way. And it was through this self-learning that I did on personal finance and business and entrepreneurship that revealed to me that there is another way. And so I created this space in my life to be able to pursue that other way. And if you're interested, I'll leave some links to some of the videos and podcasts that really opened my eyes to these other ways in the description of this video. And actually just recently, I got monetized on YouTube, and it was like the best day of my life. I honestly, I can't believe it. Like, I've always dreamed of this day coming, but now that it's actually here, I just cannot believe it. The fact that I can even make like 50 cents off a video now is just, I just can't believe it. Like, I keep saying I can't believe it, but I really just can't. Getting monetized on YouTube feels like my biggest life achievement at this point. Like, I don't know where my university degrees are, but this freaking Google AdSense pin, I am framing this and putting it on my wall. What I have gained in giving up that stable paycheck is infinitely more valuable and meaningful to me. That being my time, my autonomy, my mental health, and the chance to pursue something that I really enjoy and that gives me a sense of meaning and fulfillment and all those things. Like, just reading some of your comments, hearing that my videos have resonated with you or have helped you in some way, or some of you are even out there rooting for me to keep posting videos and keep growing, it just lights me up. There's that cliche that says that when you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. By me saying yes to the paycheck, I was saying no to, well, the essentials to health and happiness, good quality sleep, time with my friends and family. But on top of that, I was also saying no to giving myself the opportunity to pursue something that I really cared about, working for myself and making these videos, which is something that I care way more about than a paycheck. I know I am saying this from a place of huge privilege, and if I didn't have any kind of safety net of savings or my university degrees or my job experience that would allow me to get another job if I really needed, my thinking would be very different. Obviously, we all need to prioritize what needs to be prioritized. How have you found stability since quitting your job? Honestly, the only thing I've found stability in is my mental health. Everything else is still very much up in the air. My finances, where my career is going. And yes, I do have anxiety about that, but it's not overwhelming or like propelling me to go out there and get another job or anything. Mainly because I expected to feel this way when I quit. I pre-braced myself for the uncertainty and instability and anxiety that was going to come with that. And part of that bracing myself was to make a backup plan if this doesn't work out. So I decided that I will get another job if this fails, which is not my ideal, but it's certainly not the end of the world. And so knowing that I had this backup plan, which was not terrible, it made me think like, what do I really have to lose? I have everything to gain. What if something really positive came out of me taking this risk and putting myself in this instability? And if it doesn't work out, well, I'm not gonna ruin my life in the process. A lot of the times when we're going back and forth on a big decision like quitting our jobs, it's because we're looking for 100% certainty. But we have to remember that 100% certainty does not exist in any direction. It's not 100% certain that if you quit your job to pursue your hopes and dreams, that's going to work out. But it's also not 100% certain that if you stay, that you're not going to lose your job for reasons outside of your control. So might as well take that choice back into our own hands, choose the risk that we would rather have, make a backup plan if it doesn't work out, and just see what happens. Time is passing anyways, might as well see how we can make the most of it. What's your usual response when people in real life judge you for quitting? Honestly, the only judgment I've gotten in real life has been from my Asian parents. I am very lucky in that my closest circle is very supportive of me quitting and me doing this content creation thing. But if I did ever encounter any stranger or acquaintance in real life that showed any kind of judgment, I would probably respond back with something secretly petty, like, oh, have you ever had anything that you've always wanted to do with your life but have not found the courage to do yet? But while we're on the topic of disapproving Asian parents, I'm sure there are some of you out there who are in the same boat, so let's talk a bit about how to deal with Asian parents disapproving of your life decisions. There has been much more tension in my relationships with my parents since I quit my job, and when I first told them my decision, immediate catastrophizing mode. My mom was convinced that my only fate would be one where I fail and make no money ever. And my dad was like,
well, your mom and I, we were both public workers and we both worked stressful jobs. You saw how stressed I was. Everybody has to go through this.
And then immediately starts sending me job postings to more hospital positions. Obviously, I don't like that this is their reaction because it feels very unsupportive, but also like I really can't blame them. They immigrated to a new country, which is like one of the hardest things that anyone can do, to be in constant instability, constant survival mode, constant awareness that the worst case scenario could be just around the corner. And so they worked tirelessly to make sure that their kid wouldn't have to worry about or go through what they did. The issue is that they think that the only way to have this better life is to have a full-time stable job, because that's what they did. That's all they knew. And so it makes sense that when I gave up my full-time stable job, something that they worked so hard for decades for me to have, they weren't very happy about it. So while I understand where my immigrant parents are coming from, they're catastrophizing me quitting my job because they've had to catastrophize every situation out of survival, I'm still not going to base my life decisions off of solely what they want for me if it's not what I want for myself. And some people might think that's selfish, and I will openly take that feedback. And it was through therapy actually that helped me realize that my parents and I have the same goal at the end of the day. We both don't want to see me fail and make no money ever. And so I brought this up with my parents and reassured them that I don't want that for myself either. And I think that helped soothe their anxiety a bit, knowing that we had this common ground. It definitely didn't resolve the conflict entirely, but I think it helped a little bit. This is something that I am still actively going through. I don't have a magic solution to how to get your Asian parents to be on board with you quitting your job. This is still very much a work in progress for me. But this has been a start, I guess. Hopefully they'll come around to it eventually. Was there a singular defining moment that resolved you to quit? Hi, Andrew. So Andrew and I met working at the hospital. He's still one of my closest friends. And Andrew, you were there for that singular defining moment. It was when I was in my office looking at my pay stub and realizing that over the course of the year, I had made something like $38,000 after taxes and deductions. it was November. So to provide a bit more context, I was working full-time from January to June, and then part-time from June to November. And I also took some unpaid sick time off in June to recover from burnout. And then I also took some unpaid days off scattered throughout the year. At that point, the main reason I was staying in that job was for the money. And so to see that over the course of the year, I had made barely enough to be able to buy a house one day, that was the last straw. In that moment, I decided that my mental health and quality of life is worth more than $38,000. And poor Andrew is like watching me have this mental breakdown. And he was like, I think you'll feel better the sooner you send in your resignation letter. And I was like, okay. When is enough at one's job? For me, it was when I realized that the amount I was getting paid was not worth what I was giving up, aka my physical and mental well-being. I was going through things like being so deeply exhausted all the time, having difficulty getting out of bed, difficulty sleeping, chronic pain in my neck and shoulders from all the tension from the stress, and then having to pay for physio on top of that to fix that, and then also just crying a lot more often. Other things I was giving up, my time with my puppy, missing his reaction to snow for the first time, and also everything else I wanted to do and achieve in my life. Each of these things individually are invaluable to me. I can't put a dollar amount on any of them. Each person is going to have a different breaking point, but I think deep down we all know when enough is enough. And I think if we're already even asking that question, that in itself already tells us all that we need to know. Is confrontation at work in response to poor workplace behavior or possible bullying really a good thing? Is it really a good idea to stand up for yourself at work when it could just make your life even more of a living hell? Oof, girl, I can feel your pain in this question, and I get it because I've been there. I've also debated whether or not it's worth it for me to stand up for myself when I've been blatantly mistreated, because I know that it'll cause even more of a headache. I think this question is asking about toxic workplaces and toxic bosses, so let's talk about that. We spend so much of our waking hours at work with our coworkers and our bosses, and maybe some days we're gonna talk to them more than we talk to our own families. And so when we work with people who are actively hostile or refuse to see any other point of view other than their own, or are just plain difficult to work with, that can have a huge toll on our life, not just at work, but also outside of work. My motto working in a corporate setting was pick your battles. And it's really gonna be a personal decision whether you think this is a battle worth picking, if this is worth your energy, if this person is worth your energy. And I really hate that I even have to say this, because I do not condone accepting mistreatment. I am all for standing up for yourself and getting justice, no matter what. But maybe we can stand up for ourselves in ways that don't involve confronting the person directly or going to HR, and maybe we can stand up for ourselves instead by walking away. We can't change these people, but we can change our reaction to their treatment towards us, and that includes removing ourselves from them, either by switching teams or switching jobs, because you do not deserve to be treated that way. You deserve way better. Do you ever get lazy or lose motivation during the day without the structured 9 to 5 hours? I struggle with motivation as a default, but with what I'm doing now, what keeps me going is that I have intrinsic motivation about it. So quick psych class, there are two types of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation is when you're motivated to do something for the external reward that comes with it. So that could be money or grades or likes on Instagram. And intrinsic motivation is when you are motivated to do something because you actually enjoy it. You're doing it for its own sake. And intrinsic motivation is actually the only way to sustainably stay motivated and keep consistent at something. I was getting through my 9 to 5 purely on extrinsic motivation, but what I'm doing now and with this content creation thing, I'm like obsessed. I love it. I love making these videos for you and learning how I can make better content. Like I could spend hours and hours on end doing that. But I'm also not gonna lie and say that I jump out of bed every morning being like,
yeah, I can't wait to film for 2 hours today.
I still have days where I have to force myself to sit down and do the work. But what's different now is that I am working towards a meaningful goal, something that fulfills my life aspirations. Whereas before with my 9 to 5, I was solely working towards a paycheck. And so the fuel feels very different. One felt draining, while this one feels energizing. Also, if I'm ever struggling with motivation, I've gotten pretty good at telling myself like, girl, this is way easier than what you were doing before, so you have nothing to complain about. And that usually does the trick for me. Do you have any regrets? I initially answered this question as no, I don't have any regrets. But looking back now, I think I regret not looking at my pay stub earlier and taking the time earlier to understand what each line on my pay stub meant. Because I think if I did that earlier, my decision making might have looked different, and maybe I would have left earlier or started looking into different career paths earlier. But despite staying longer than I would have preferred, I don't regret my experience at the hospital because I learned so much and grew so much as a person, and I learned so much about healthcare and navigating the healthcare system and aging and what happens when your health deteriorates and how to prepare for that. And I was able to take that knowledge to my family and do future planning with them, which was such a meaningful experience. And I am definitely much more assertive as a person now and much more confident in my ability to be a leader. And yeah, I would not be the person I am today if it weren't for my experience working at a hospital. But at the end of the day, it just was not the best fit. Every day that I stayed there, it felt like my regret was growing about the fact that I was putting off pursuing a career and a life that I really wanted and that I knew I was going to regret if I never gave myself that chance. Has it been all sunshine and rainbows? Absolutely not, but I would still much rather deal with the set of stressors I'm dealing with now than the stressors that I was dealing with in that job. I fully accept any negative consequences that have come to me or will come to me as a result of my decision because I chose this, I signed up for this. But the key difference is that this feels like a choice that I made rather than a choice that felt like it was made for me. This is hands down one of the best decisions I have ever made. I am not any kind of expert on quitting the 9 to 5, and if you've stuck around for this whole video, it should be clear to you that I have not figured everything out yet. Everyone's circumstances are going to be different, and not everything I've said is going to apply for everyone. But if my story can help anybody who has watched this video, then making this video would have been worth it for me. Also, it's very easy for me to just sit here in a vacuum and monologue to a camera. I want to hear your comments, your stories and opinions. I read all of your comments and I appreciate all of them, well, most of them. So let's keep the conversation going in the comments. I'll leave my other videos that I've made following my quitting my job journey in the description if you're interested in checking those out. But in any case, as always, I hope you are doing well and I will see you next time. Bye.